Somebody got a haircut, all right.
Ooh. All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 7th. It is 3 o'clock. This is the Housing and Economic Development Committee. That's why we're here. Had to look down at my paper for a second. We have 4 of our 5 members present, so we do have a quorum. Do we have any public comment today, Taylor? No? All right, now we do have all of our members present. We have the, any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. We have the minutes approval from our December 3rd. If I could have a mover, moved by Legislator Brooks, seconded by Legislator Dawson. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. We do have some appointments. We have advisory board appointments. It's ID number 13790. And it looks like it's to the Strategic Tourism Planning Board. Michelle Cordinar, at-large member, term expires December 31st, 2028. And Megan Amajandro, thank you very much. I apologize if I messed those up, which sounds like I did. As the Arts and Culture Representative, term expires December 31st, 2028. If I could have somebody move those, please. Moved by Legislator Pillar, seconded by Legislator Dawson. Any discussion about these? We have to go into executive session. Seeing none. All those in favor? Great. That passes unanimously. Congratulations to those 2 individuals, and thank you for your about to be service to the Strategic Tourism Planning Board. Chair's report. This is the last meeting of this formation, and we'll see what the new year brings. It has been a pleasure with everyone. Hopefully, some or many of us will continue in our capacity here in this committee. We were notified of one change potentially coming to HED, which would be the removal of the continuum of care, our unhoused, and it looked like low income housing.
Right. I think what ends up happening if we go through with this is that this committee will keep housing affordability issues and market rate and workforce housing. And then all the low income affordable continuum of care issues will go to HHS because so much of that requires supportive services, and those services are HHS services. Does that make sense? I hear
it. I personally am a little disappointed and would like to see it.
Well, you can join HHS.
I plan to ask to.
Okay.
I think it, from my perspective, the unhoused conversation was something that was not getting attention until it was moved into a committee based on housing, and that was a big part of it a couple of years ago. And I think we've done a good job in this committee really trying to lift that up and continue that conversation and that work, and we've made good progress. So if this is in fact a recommendation and there's still time for discussion, I would welcome that. But if the decision's been made without discussion, it's a little frustrating, but I understand it's the decision of the chair and vice chair to make that decision. I think we should ask as members of the legislature to have clarity around what some of that means. I sort of look to our planning folks. Does the Community Housing Development Fund, which deals with low-income projects, where does that fall?
That stays with this committee.
Yeah, so there needs to be, I think, some clarity on language for sure, based on what we received last night. But hopefully we can continue to do good work as it relates to housing in this committee as well. Veronica?
I don't know if we're having this discussion now or ever, but I
feel somewhat similarly to Greg, or I just read the news about the committee assignment shifting, and I'll also be asking to join HHS for that reason, so we might have a little exodus. I totally get why like emergency shelter and low-income housing and supported housing belongs with Health and Human Services. And I have not been going to the HHS committees regularly since, 3 years ago when HED was not a committee. So I don't know what the meetings have been like, but I do bristle at the idea of dividing housing issues along a affordable, not affordable type line, especially because that is not well defined. I mean, for some use cases, it's defined with numbers, but I'm a little bit thinking out loud, but I think that some of the problems with our, our whole society's discussions about housing come from, separating. For some people, housing is housing, and for some people, it's a social service, and this sort of housing can house this kind of person, but not that kind of person.
I think the distinction is not along the lines of how much housing needs to cost to fit into these various categories. I think the distinction is housing that requires supportive services is a very different animal from everything else.
I have Legislator Brooks and then Legislator Sigler and then Legislator Pillar. We can come back to you if you'd like.
I don't want to assume that that what Legislator Dawson is saying is what I'm saying. To me, I do think the last few years we've done a pretty good job raising the awareness and having these conversations, because it wasn't happening in HHS when I first started in this way. And, over the last 4 years, there's been different leadership in HHS, so I think people have certain priorities. To me, the distinction, and maybe this is what Deb is saying, but for me, is there is permanent housing and there's non-permanent housing. I think anything that's non-permanent housing should be at HHS. And when we're talking about shelter services, things of that nature, I think should be at HHS. I don't think there should be a split between affordable housing, low-income housing, market rate housing. I think that gets really confusing. There's a lot of other reasons why, but I think just having a conversation like, no, this is low-income housing, this falls over here, not all low-income housing, and a lot of housing complexes that would be considered low-income, they don't take DSS services anyways. Some of them don't even take Section 8. It's based on your income. So to me, the big distinction is permanent housing versus other housing. So whether it's transitional housing, whether it's supportive housing, whether it's shelter services, sheltering isn't housing, it's services. In the way I look at shelter, so it's not supposed to be permanent, it's supposed to be really transitional. So I don't know if all those distinctions have been made in the decision and what this will look like moving forward. I think it's a worthwhile discussion, but I certainly wouldn't want to see a project that wants to come online that involves low-income housing, affordable housing, mixed-use housing, whatever you want to say, have to go to both committees. I think it should come to HED, it should come to housing, but I think all those other components should go to HHS.
I think we can work on that. I think we can work on that.
Legislator Sigler.
Well, I mean, I just want to say I don't think maybe you give this enough credit. This wasn't going anywhere. It was moved to this committee, and I think this committee should chalk this up as a win. I mean, you moved from nothing to now there's a location, there's a plan. I mean, I've seen blueprints for not blueprints, but what this thing is going to look like. I mean, that's an amazing job. I mean, to go from nothing to literally we have the site, we have an operating code blue shelter there now, and to actually have a timeline on this thing is pretty great. And I think the mission, though, is changing. kind of like this committee has done its role, and now the mission is going to change to this supportive housing model. Since it is, I think, almost definitely going to move out of this committee to Health and Human Services, the only thing I would really like to see, not the only thing in the shelter that I'd like to see, is I hope they do look at other shelters like Dutchess County and Bergen, who used the Bergen County model, which was in New Jersey, where the first floor is set up as more of a wet shelter. The second floor is, you would move from the wet shelter up to supportive housing, and then even the third floor could be like supportive housing as they get ready to move into a Section 8 kind of situation, so that you're actually doing kind of gradations, so you can take somebody who is homeless currently and get them in a position whereas they can actually manage an apartment. So I do hope they look at those other models as they're doing this, and it's just not kind of the way we've always done a shelter in the past. But yeah, I would chalk this up as a win for this committee. I mean,
Absolutely.
You really took it from nothing, and it's a real thing now. So, but the mission has changed.
Yeah, no, and I Veronica, sorry.
You can respond if you want.
Go ahead, no, please.
Whatever the issue breakdown between committees, I would love to see at least one joint HED, HHS, sorry, Housing and Economic Development, Health and Human Services Committee meeting this year. I think we're overdue for that, even if well, yeah, regardless of how housing is split or assigned or what, it's always gonna be very related to the work of both committees.
Deborah?
Yeah, nobody's saying that this committee didn't do a good job. But what I have noticed this year is that this committee has been very, very overscheduled. And so we needed to figure out how to even out the burden. I don't know what your perception is, Travis, but, Shauna has suggested to me that your load in HHS has been kind of light this year. I don't know if that's true or not. But it's just a question of trying to figure out how to even out the workloads. I will say that in the past, before your cohort came on board, there was a lot of cross-pollination between PEAK and HED, because it used to be PDEC, and that wasn't very workable either.
Train wreck.
But one of the things that we did then was have whoever was chair of PEAK be vice chair of HED and vice versa, so that there was a lot of cross-pollination between the two committees on issues that overlapped. So that's also a possibility. The intent here was simply to try to get all the housing that required supportive services in HHS and out of HED, not because HED wasn't doing a good job with it, but just to even out the workload. So yes, discussions can continue about this.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I think, a lot that faced this committee this past year, and different needs, and I would have, I guess, appreciated a conversation about the workload or the proposed workload, before this type of conversation, before rebalancing, to see if there really was a challenge. And I think this type of discussion when making these changes is important. My concern, I think, much to Legislator Pillars, is some of the othering that takes place in this process by putting low-income housing or capital A affordable housing somewhere else other than housing. I think homeless or unhoused response as it relates to shelter services and those type of things makes a lot of sense. I think some of the work that Liddy's doing is trying to not get folks in temporary housing, but get them in permanent supportive housing. Where should that conversation be had, I think, is a question mark, because that is housing, and this is housing and economic development. But I think our unhoused, our homeless emergency sheltering conversation absolutely probably has a place in HHS. But I think that hopefully we can further refine some of the language and create some more specifics around what we're asking both committees to do, because I think clarity will be important in this process. Travis?
Yeah, I agree with much of what you said, Greg. I think that we had this transition. Housing, in terms of shelter services, was done through DSS. It was done through a contract with Red Cross, not Red Cross,
St. John's.
St. John's, and it was at the hotel, right? It wasn't, we didn't have to build anything. We didn't have to create anything. Then we got to a place where it was like, oh, we have to create this thing. And I think at that point, it was already here and probably made sense to be here because we were creating something. And now we're at a place where we're back to managing contracts and services. So I think that changes that conversation. And I do agree that if you start to look at permanent housing, whether you want to call it low income, no income, I think when you separate that, it does a disservice to housing, period. So I think that has to be in the same conversation. I don't know, I think that there were times when we had presentations that made meetings run longer. I think that there are folks that give presentations and want to give all the information. They do a slideshow and want to read every word rather than the highlight of each page. And so sometimes that takes up quite a bit of time. So I don't know about being overscheduled. I think that presentations sometimes, and what do you say to somebody presenting, okay, we've heard enough? you can't do that. You want to give people their airtime. So I don't know about a scheduling issue, but I definitely think housing, permanent, long-term, it has to be. And if we have to have 2, 3, maybe quarterly joint conversations to make sure this thing keeps pushing forward, I think that's fair. I think that's what we do, or special meetings. So I do agree, and I think we should have further conversation about what exactly that looks like.
Great. I appreciate the dialogue and the candor. If anybody has anything else on this topic to add, great. We can have that for a moment. If not, we can move through the agenda. Okay, seeing nothing further. County administrators reports. Don't have don't have anybody from county admin on, so we'll maybe come back to that. We do have a homelessness and housing update, a report and discussion. Lydia, I see that you're here. Brittany, I also see that you're here. Donna and crew. I guess, Brittany, I'll give it to you for a quick shelter update, and then Liddy, maybe we can have a little bit of update on the HUD process and where things stand at the moment. But Brittany, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello. Yeah, county admin might hop on soon. We just got out of a meeting with OTDA. So currently at the Code Blue shelter, we're averaging 41 individuals a night. Last night we had 37. The highest that we've had on a night is 55. This year we're seeing a higher number of women, so they have turned one of the overflow areas into extra sleeping space for just women, or women identifying. In our THA shelter, we currently have 4 families totaling 15 persons. We have 35 adults, so 50 total for THA. And then also at the THA shelter, we have 1 family totaling 2 persons. And then in other locations, hotels, we have 31 for THA and 6 for Code Blue. In terms of permanent housing updates, we still are at 25 families that have moved into permanent housing, so that hasn't changed since last time. And we have moved 1 more adult individual into housing, so we now have a total of 13 adults that have moved into permanent housing from the shelter.
Excellent. Questions for Brittany and our friends at DSS? No? All right. Well, thanks for the update, Brittany and team, and appreciate all the good work. And, you know, we've heard a lot of great reports and things throughout the community, and sounds like things are really going well at the shelter. So, you know, kudos to your team and the folks at
Volunteers of America.
Thank you, VOA. I was trying to get the acronym, but I appreciate it. Thank you again.
Yep, you're welcome.
Lydia, I'll turn it over to you. A little bit of a HUD update.
Great. Don't worry. Oh no, did I freeze? I don't have a presentation, Travis, but I do have a little update. It's actually pretty brief. So the last time I was here, continuums of care across the United States were in like a little bit of a frantic moment. Notice of funding opportunity had come out that was drastically different than any such thing from HUD in the past. And it was asking communities to basically completely veer away from the permanent supportive housing model, transition into this transitional housing model, and cut our funding by basically 70%. So big deal threat at that time. Since then, there were 2 lawsuits that have started, and that notice of funding opportunity has been enjoined by the District Court of Rhode Island. HUD released another notice of funding opportunity in the meantime to try sort of again, like another crack at getting their policy through on the NOFO, but that one is also enjoined. So we're currently in like basically what I would call a pause across the United States when it comes to continuum of care funding and really even knowing what's coming next. We did get information, well, we were supposed to get it on January 6th. They asked for a 2-day extension. So tomorrow is the day that COCs are supposed to receive more information about how to implement any new HUD funding. And what the court is basically asking HUD to do is to revert back to the 24-25 rules and fund all of our reallocations. So those are programs like Chartwell House, Magnolia House, Amici House, permanent supportive housing we know and love. So the court is saying, you guys, HUD did this inappropriately. For now, we're going to honor that 24-25 NOFO. Which is good news, I think, and hope, but they haven't given us any information. The thing that, and that's my update. The little pin I want to put in this update, and I'll continue updating you, is that even though it does appear like this second year, this 2025 funding is going to continue to be able to support permanent supportive housing, it's really like on a technicality. And as a community, we need to start preparing for what it will look like next year, which is really like July, when they issue the same kind of notice of funding opportunity, and they do it within the legal bounds to do so. And so to that end, I'm working on putting together some sort of targeted contingency planning, collecting data about systems that aren't as traditionally at the homeless response system table. And you may be hearing from me, some of you are involved in some of those systems, but there are places like linking with our criminal justice system, probation, parole, law enforcement, alternatives to incarceration, all of those things, because a major component of HUD's new policy is the criminalization of homelessness. And so if that's going to happen, we want to be able to build strong networks within our criminal justice system so that people are able to remain housed as much as possible. Those are all my words. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you for keeping it crisp and informative.
Yeah.
Questions for Liddy on the HUD update?
They expect to make awards in May. So for our community, we would not have a funding gap. There are communities that are running out of funding already, but not here.
Got it. Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're projecting that we would not have a funding gap for this 2026 year until the next set of guidelines are issued later in the year.
Our cuts, we would start to feel our cuts if they had gotten their way and been through and whatever, all of those same kind of cuts, 70% of our money, total change in the way we do things, in October of 2027.
October of 2027.
No, 2028, sorry. October of 2028
Okay.
will be funded through 27, and then
So we're okay basically
Yeah.
for 2 years?
we're not okay basically for 2 years. That sounds like better than it is. If the court decides to honor the 2025 NOFO, we won't feel the impact, which would come in the 2026 NOFO, until the fiscal year October. It is 2028. It would be 2028. But I think that is makes it feel like we're safer than we are as far as funding goes, because that would be a wind down date. Like, that would be the date that programs would be closing, would be in October of 2028, based on the cuts.
Still don't understand the difference.
Does that make, I don't know how,
Lydia,
the dates are confusing because it's fiscal year and it's always a year behind.
if I may ask, if it's not too much of you to maybe put a timeline together,
Yeah.
that maybe for some of us that are a little bit more visual, we could try to maybe follow along, like NOFA application, funds run through this period, just to maybe help clarify for the committee to
I
better
could
understand it.
try, and we're not on any normal timeline.
Okay.
But I will try.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just anything to help us wrap our heads around when exactly certain cuts or certain decision points would come into play, especially if there's a need, you know, for the county in any way to look at possibly backfilling, you know, anything, if that's even a possibility. I just think the more we can kind of try to track this in some way would be helpful.
Yeah, totally. And that timeline makes a lot of sense for contingency planning too. So I'll get that. I'll get something together.
All right. Great. Well, I appreciate it, Liddy. Thank you for keeping us up to date and all the good work that you're always doing. Hope to see you in some committee next month. All right. Well, looks like it's our friends from Planning and Sustainability who brought 90% of their department with them. So everybody's welcome to the table. Don't shy away. Welcome to play a role in the conversation. For our recently other legislators in the room, you're welcome to also sit at the table. You don't have to sit in the gallery if you want to be part of the conversation. We are joined by 3 additional members of the legislature. So feel free to take your seats, and you will be recognized as such if you want to participate in the conversation. This is for all members of the legislature, not just members of the committee. You're welcome to participate at any point. So I don't want you to feel like you're guests. You're now home. So welcome to the table. I will turn it over to everyone for the are we doing the housing snapshot first?
Yes.
Great. Okay. It's ID number 13746.
I'll just introduce and say, Katie Borgella, Commissioner of Planning and Sustainability. We heard you were looking for presentations, so we've got a couple for you today, and Travis in particular, hope you enjoy it. I know Sean has been working hard on making it crisp and succinct, but it is a lot of data to get through, so enjoy the presentation.
And Shauna, and David, thank you for your flexibility last meeting where we felt important that we give this enough time. So again, appreciate your flexibility in doing so.
Sure, thanks. So my name is Shauna Stevenson. I'm the Housing and Community Development Planner in the Department of Planning and Sustainability. And this presentation is about the 2024 Housing Snapshot. The Housing Snapshot essentially tracks the housing development in Tompkins County since 2016. Tompkins County did a housing needs assessment that established targets in the 2017 housing strategy. And what the goal was to determine how many units of different kinds would the county need to have sustainable housing for all the residents here in the county. So that set targets for workforce, senior units, supportive and special need beds, and student beds. So the snapshot essentially is a document, it's available online, that has a full report, and this presentation just goes over some of the highlights. And it monitors the trends and conditions that we've seen since 2016. The sections of the snapshot in the document include demographic and workforce trends, housing trends, most recent data that we can find, and equity indicators, which is part of the county strategic operations plan to track those metrics. And the data sources include those from the Census Bureau, American Community Survey, Department of Labor and U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and Association of Realtors, Tompkins County Department of Assessment and GIS, and other municipal staff, local experts, and other community partners were really essential in making sure this information was accurate and timely. And you may be asking, why are we talking about 2024? It's the beginning of 2026, but a lot of this data takes time for it to be validated, and so a lot of this data is to 2023 or 2024, or as recent as we could find. So this slide shows essentially the overall unit production that we've seen since 2016. There were targets that are seen in the chart to the right there, but essentially the county saw about 57% of the units that we were hoping to have built in that time frame. And there are different kinds of housing that we were hoping to see, and you can see that the only metric that met its intended goal were for student beds. That's also the only market rate housing that the strategy had set targets for. And that was just to match enrollment of students since 2016 between Cornell University and Ithaca College. Otherwise, there's a bit of a deficit for sale single-family homes, condos, rental units, subsidized units for senior housing. We did also meet the permanent supportive housing goal of 100 units, but since 2022, there has been a report from the Human Services Coalition that asked for another 100 units to meet the needs of our community. And we'll talk more in depth about each of these targets in later slides. One way to look at the housing needs in Tompkins County is to talk about the demographics. So who lives here, what are the trends, and has the housing unit development matched what we've seen in our population here. So since actually 2013, but also 2018 to 2023, the Tompkins County population has remained pretty much the same at about 102,000 people. And surprisingly, the number of households has increased while the average household size decreased. So although the population has remained the same, we've seen that household sizes have gotten smaller, meaning that there are more people looking for 1 or 2 bedroom units and not 3 or 4 bedroom units or larger. So there's a need for more units for those smaller households. Another thing is the age proportion has been more in the 65 years and older population. That increased significantly since 2013. This is not unlike what we've seen across the state, but it is something to keep in mind because we've seen that be a larger part of the proportion of the population growing, and that community has different housing needs than other age groups. It's still a relatively young population, likely due to the college population here. And we've seen median household incomes continue to increase while employment has been low compared to New York State average. So essentially, that there's some lack of workers here in the county, which we'll see in a trend chart in the next slide. So what we're seeing is that there's less employed people in Tompkins County. I just want to be clear that this chart represents jobs that are sourced in Tompkins County, and it's people employed in jobs that are in Tompkins County. So you see during the 2020 recession, because of COVID, there was a large decrease in the total non-farm employment numbers, and it hasn't really gone up much since. There could be a variety of reasons for that, but essentially that just means that there's less people in Tompkins County who are employed, although the population has stayed the same, so that could be for a variety of factors, whereas people have enough income where they don't have to work, or they have non-traditional jobs that aren't counted in this. or they're self-employed. And again, the unemployment rates have remained lower than across New York State. Another thing to look at is the housing cost burden, and this is how much one person is paying or a household is paying compared to their income for either their rental costs, which includes their rent and utilities, or for their homeowner costs, which is their mortgage with their taxes and insurance costs, as well as their utilities. And this is a chart from 2013 to 2023, and you can see that renters have been increasingly housing cost burdened, while owner households with a mortgage and without a mortgage have been decreasingly burdened with their household costs. So that doesn't mean that it's not expensive to own a home or to buy a home, but rather that those who have maybe already owned their home for a long time are seeing that their costs are decreasing as a proportion of those who own their home. And it also just highlights the fact that being a renter is increasingly unaffordable for many people. Over 46% of Tompkins County residents are renters, so this does impact a lot of folks living in Tompkins County.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
On the ownership front, I'm assuming interest rates, I mean, if we did a look back at interest rates between 13 and sort of now, or much of the refi, from the pandemic, do you have any sense is that where much of the driver is in the decreasing burden? Or what would contribute to a decreasing burden of home ownership?
Well, I will just point out that to be a housing cost burden, that's 30% of your gross income is going to housing costs, and to be severely cost burdened, it's 50% or more of your gross income going to housing costs. And I don't know if David wants to answer that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's a little confusing is we see housing is more expensive now than it was before, and interest rates are higher now than they were before. But when we have turnover in ownership housing, people who have gotten a mortgage more recently are less likely to be cost burdened, because you can't get a mortgage if you're going to be cost burdened. So people who have had a mortgage for a long time, lending requirements were less strict. Also, if your income goes up, if you've owned a house for 30 years and you bought it under lower prices and your income keeps going up, but your payments stay the same, that makes your burden reduce.
Interesting. Deborah?
Yeah, David's explanation is consistent with something that I read recently that said one of the reasons that the housing market's likely to be slowing down is because banks have become much more restrictive about who they lend to. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Judith?
Maybe you can clarify for me. I read that in the calculation of housing costs for homeowners that maintenance costs are not included. Do you know if that's correct?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I can double check that. The methodology and the data sources are listed in Appendix A of the housing snapshot, but I can double check that.
Yeah, I think the specific selected costs include utilities and taxes, but saving to do a roof every 20 years is probably not included.
Right. I mean, that just seems like it's hard to compare these numbers, because for renters, the landlords certainly take into account the cost of maintenance when they're coming up with the rent, right? And when people buy a home, they have to take that into account. It goes into the cost of housing. So it's hard, it's like apples to oranges for me when I look at numbers without maintenance. This might be $1,000 a month.
Yeah, there is also a chart in the snapshot that we don't have in this presentation, but it goes over what sort of costs you would have to anticipate if you were going to be a new homeowner in Tompkins County based on the median household price and median wages here in the county. So that's another thing to look at, to have a more comprehensive view of how much money, if you wanted to buy a home, what you would need for cash. I think even if you're just putting down 3.5%, you still need over $28,000 in cash for closing costs. And that's not including the maintenance costs, which can range between a few hundred to thousands a year. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Another metric we were looking at was housing tenure by race. And this showed that householders identifying as white alone accounted for 77% 77% of householders in 2020, but it represented 88% of owner-occupied households. And what that shows, and when you look at the other races listed here, is that there's a higher proportion of those households identifying as white alone who are homeowners and are renters as a proportion of the population. And every other race shows that there's a higher percentage of renters in that category than there are homeowners. And similarly, for Hispanic and Latino householders, they're representing 4.7% of all householders, but only 2.3% of owner-occupied households and 7.1% of renter-occupied households. And just shows that considering renters are more likely to be cost-burdened, it becomes clear that housing affordability impacts racial equity in this community as well when housing cost burden for renters continues to increase. Looking at the for-sale housing market, you can see here in the chart, Tompkins County is to the left and the adjacent counties are listed to the right there. And this is showing the prices of homes between 2020 and 2024, the median sales price. And there's a yellow line indicating what the median income was for 2023. And the median income in the surrounding counties, including Tompkins County, is within the same $10,000, but you can see that for Tompkins County, the median sale price of a single-family home is much more than our surrounding counties. The national median sale price, for comparison, is just over $400,000. So Tompkins County is still more affordable than the national average, but in our surrounding area, you can see it's much more expensive. And additionally, the cost of a home in Tompkins County rose by nearly 28%, which is equivalent to almost $90,000 in the last 5 years. And let's see. The rate of increase has been similar to surrounding areas, but because Tompkins County is more expensive, you see that higher price. The rental housing market reflects something similar, where the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment is significantly higher than the surrounding counties at $1,590, and that was for 2024. To be able to afford a one-bedroom unit, one would have to earn at least $63,000 a year to keep their cost burden at or below 30% of gross income. However, the median wage earner gets about $56,000, which is about $8,000 less than they would need for that to be affordable for them. While the median household income has increased 8% for residents of Tompkins County from 2013 to 2023, the median rent increased 11% over that same time period. So it's just showing that the rent costs are outpacing median income increases.
Shauna, as we get into, and maybe this is more for the housing study or a comparison, the age of the housing stock in some of these compared to the age of the housing, the average age of a one bedroom in Tompkins County, I'm gonna go on a limb here based on, some of the units that we've created, is likely much younger than some of our neighboring counties who have not seen the same sort of development growth or development pace. Is there any equalization or metric around that? Again, it's unaffordable is the moral of the story, but sort of looking at, you could be in a 30-year-old apartment for $733 in Cuga County, and how many 30-year-old one bedrooms are, I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Sure.
Just curious.
Yeah, there are some data that show the age of housing stock by county and by the state too. And I believe that's in the snapshot. We didn't go over it in this presentation, but did you have anything for that? Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. And in the following slides, we'll talk about the specific metrics that were tracked, the housing targets from the housing strategy that covered housing through 2025. So for workforce housing, that's affordable to households earning up to 100% of AMI. That's a measure of median family income that's determined by HUD. That includes market rate and income restricted units. But there were a few units built under $200,000. That was a goal. And we had about 666 new single-family homes. So that's about 17% of what we were hoping to see of the total 3,800 new ownership units. And since 2017, $200,000, which was what we were hoping to see more housing built at that price point for sale, it equated to $256,000 in 2024. The housing strategy did not account for that inflation number, so you'll see things just got more expensive over time. So trying to find units selling at that price still, you're not going to see that. And condominiums are historically difficult to build here in Tompkins County, so we've only had 20 built since 2016. For workforce housing, rental units, we had a bit more success with almost 38% of the goal achieved there. And those are new income restricted rental units, excluding supportive and senior affordable rentals because they have other amenities that are not just for workforce housing. Senior housing, we've had about 68 subsidized senior housing units built in one project, so we did not meet the goal to 100 to 200 of those units. Additionally, the Medicaid Assisted Living Program facility was not built. New York State has not been active in this program, so that hasn't really been happening anywhere. Market rate senior housing units have been built, but those projects have had to reduce their age restriction requirements in order to be able to lease the units because those were market rate, and now they're open to the general market due to the slow lease up of those units. Supportive housing and special needs beds were tracked as well. As you can see, the permanent supportive housing beds that were created exceeded the original goal of 100. So that is a success there. However, single room occupancy units reserved for those earning under 30% of area median income, we've only seen 4 of those. Then there might be naturally occurring units that would fit that description, but that's not something that we have tracked. And we see that the need has been acute because the increase of homelessness has been slow, but it has been increasing over time since 2020 to 2024. So we do still need to have these units. And as previously mentioned, the Continuum of Care released a Home Together Tompkins plan calling for additional units as well. Student bed targets have been met for 2024. These have done well in the market, has kept up with the needs and the increase of enrollment, and that does include on and off campus beds. It's not just units with bedrooms, but actual beds for students. And another metric we were looking at is how much housing has been developed in development focus areas. We want to develop in development focus areas because that's where infrastructure already exists. It's usually more connected to transportation and is more sustainable environmentally because of the connections with transportation and not having sprawl fragmenting the landscape with dispersed housing developments. And we've done well there with about 61% of all new housing being constructed in a development focus area, with the largest proportion being built in the urban center. So in conclusion, with the housing snapshot, we've seen that the cost of construction has been significantly higher, especially since the 2020 recession and since the strategy adoption. And there's an acute need for more affordable and permanent supportive housing. With the recent changes in HUD policy around continuum of cares, existing permanent supportive housing units may be lost. So especially paying attention to that is important here. There is a growing demand from seniors, just in the larger proportion of those aged over 65 being part of our population. And affordable and workforce housing development has not met the target, so if more is going to be built, subsidy structures supporting the creation of these units are increasingly necessary to see them get built. And up next, the next housing strategy we're working on right now, it's going to address these and other housing concerns in the county housing issue.
Deborah Dawson.
Thank you. I was just wondering, Shauna, what What do you mean by subsidy structures for affordable units? Could you expand on that?
Sure. So I think that housing strategy, one of the goals is to be able to see what would work, to be able to build more affordable housing here, like what kind of like financing structure would be needed, for example. But even thinking about the Community Housing Development Fund, which specifically contributes to projects that are targeting certain area median income households, that's an example of where if there's not enough funding from the state, or in order to give more support to a project in our area, projects like that really do make a difference in the development of affordable housing, where if it didn't exist, it's just that much less going towards that building.
Okay, so you're really just talking about financing. Yeah, thank you.
Questions from other legislators? Well, you really stumped us here. We're not usually a quiet bunch. Veronica.
Because you mentioned condo development is historically difficult in Tompkins County. Can you remind me or tell me why?
Sure, and David might be able to fill in for me, but essentially it's a very difficult tax structure that in New York State in particular that requires people to pay for their development before it's even built, before it's even really approved. And it just takes a lot of upfront individual investment in order to make that happen. So it just hasn't seemed feasible. I don't know if David wants to add anything else to that.
Yeah, I think there's two main components. The biggest is that the state makes it very difficult, and along with the difficulty of the process with the state. So when you want to develop a condo, before you can start advertising it, you have to have a complete plan for every single system in the building. You have to register that with the state. That's to protect people who are buying up front, because generally condos have to pre-sell a large percentage of their units. So the state wants to protect them from not getting a bait and switch situation. But then because you're locked in on, say, what water heater you're going to use in those condo units, a year, 2 years before you start construction, it increases costs later. Most developers, they start building and they find what toilets are on sale that year and they get those instead of the ones that seemed like a good buy 2 years ago. Along with that, there's a long tail of liability for condo construction. So when you build a new condo building, as the builder, you're on the hook for defects for 10 years. And attorneys have found that it's a very lucrative business to go to condo associations in year 9 and say, hey, has anybody had any problems? Do your cabinet doors line up? So that makes the insurance for condo developers dramatically more expensive than building the exact same building for rental. The profit is different. We have property values going up. With a condo, you build it and sell it immediately. You don't get any benefit from values in the neighborhood continuing to increase. So those are all kind of structural state level issues. Locally, we kind of have a chicken or egg problem, because the way market analysis for condo projects works is you look at, for each project, what percentage of the total market that project would represent, with the goal being to be a very small percentage of the total market, because that's deemed safe by lenders. But we don't have very many condos, so every project is a large percentage of the existing total condo market. So then it's more risky to fund it. So you can't fund it, so we can't get more. So then the next project can't be a small percentage. It's a cycle.
And local banks aren't used to condos, so they're really reluctant to lend.
Right.
It's a problem,
Yeah. And the other side of that is it's just really lucrative to build rental because we have such a shortage. I will say it's a lot easier to convert an existing apartment building to condo than to build a new building as condo. So at some point when the market makes sense, we may see conversion of apartments to condos.
Rachel and then Travis.
I was wondering if in 2016 or 2017, when the targets were set, if there was also a list of suggestions for specific policies or programs that should be pursued, like, I don't know, a manufactured home site, or specific ways to help other municipalities with zoning changes, or just, yeah.
Yeah, so the original policy or strategy does include a lot of policy suggestions, and I would say a lot of those were followed. Some of them were ruled out, were evaluated more and decided not to pursue. Some things that came out of that, the IDA workforce housing policy, where buildings that get a pilot contribute money that goes towards funding affordable housing. That's something that's been implemented. Working with municipalities on zoning reform was a suggestion, and I think we've seen good progress there. And continuing to grow the Community Housing Development Fund was part of that as well. So that strategy included policies as well as targets for certain kinds of development. We're now at the point that the next strategy will also, I think, look strongly at what are the work items for the county legislature, the county staff, and our development partners, and how we can move the needle more. Because I think the result of this snapshot is a lot has happened, but also we need to do more. The one thing that it didn't include is we didn't have any goal for market rate development. So when we say like, oh, we're so far below the units that we wanted, because there was no target for market rate, and of course we got a lot of market rate, that's not accounted for in terms of success or failure or whatever. We got a lot of units, many thousands of units, that aren't tracked in our snapshot because there wasn't a goal to build a certain amount. I think in our next strategy, we'll be looking at a more holistic picture of the market so that we can say, where are we in terms of demand for all units?
I have Travis and then Judith.
I hope I say this correctly, because in no way am I trying to point the finger at anybody. So I don't want whatever I say to sound like that. I just want to say that up front. But it seems like the numbers were created to keep pace, but never were a realistic goal for this community, given how expensive property is. And of course, in 2016, you couldn't think that COVID was coming and all these other things. But to create that many units for these different categories just seems unrealistic given Ithaca. Like if we were in Broome County or some other county, maybe Onondaga County, but so is there a place where this is what we have to do to keep pace, but this is our goal, this is our realistic goal for this community? Because it just seems like when you look at 17%, 37%, it's like we're not doing our job, but you all are working really hard to get to those numbers. And I don't know if the numbers that were set were realistic given where we live to begin with. So I think it puts you all in an unfair position. And then now over the last few years, we've had some dismal failures with Art House and Asteri, and in my mind, it seems like it'd be even harder to attract folks that are going to develop properties that would have a similar structure, because we've had so many issues in these other two. So I hope moving forward, we're able to have numbers that really represent where we are, because I understand the time and the effort and the work that you all put in, and it would be nice to see those numbers reflect what's realistic versus what we have to do to keep up. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, I would just say, I think we're fortunate because we have Megan McDonald, who was our deputy commissioner, who actually wrote last strategy. So she had a lot of insight into how those numbers were developed and why they were developed. And we'll definitely be revisiting the criteria and how you set those targets. I think it's a great point, though, Travis, to make sure that they're both achievable, but also inspiring and something that we are trying to get to. But yeah, I think I hate seeing headlines in the Ithaca Voice saying county doesn't achieve its goals. You know, that's no fun for anybody. Mostly the people who are trying to afford houses here, but there are a lot of things that aren't within our control, and I think reflecting that is a great suggestion.
Megan, then Judith, and then Deborah, and then I do want to keep pace.
And I'll just make a quick mention that I think one thing that was touched upon is we didn't really have a target for market rate rental, because I think there's been an appreciation that home buying opportunities are really lacking. And there was the kind of the logical conclusion that to the extent the homeownership opportunities are not provided, households will either remain rental, either remain, in some cases doubled up, in households, not kind of new households splitting off, or frankly in commuting in some cases. So I hate to say that actually these numbers were on some levels conservative in comparison to what the consultant we worked with was originally modeling, because we recognize that we've had a long history of in-commuting, and there are real reasons why people may work outside or live outside the county and work here and not necessarily move here, even if we had a perfect housing situation. So all of these things do impact each other. And so we have seen a good amount of market rate rental built, and I think in some way that's been a little part of the safety or the release valve, since we haven't seen a lot of for sale.
Judith and then Deborah.
I keep coming back to this chart of housing cost burden, and I'm seeing, 60% of renters are cost burdened and 36% are severely cost burdened, which is a shocking number. How do you take into account the student population? Students are often renting, not in dorms, but they don't have an income or an income to speak of. Are they included in that number, or are they separately considered?
The housing cost burden numbers are coming from the American Community Survey, 5-year estimates. So they don't distinguish between student renters and other renters. They don't do congregate living like dorms though. So it likely includes students as well.
Do you think that's inflating the numbers in that students aren't really trying to have incomes but are still renting and are in that pool?
It's common to have slightly higher cost burden in high student population areas, but students are dramatically undercounted in the census because, if you were a student here, would you respond to the census? Probably not. So it does remove all students who are in dorms. It really, and in dorm-like environments, but it could include, for example, when I moved here, I was a grad student with a family of 4 living in Southside, and also a census nerd, so I would have responded to the census and it would have counted me. But I don't think that it has such an impact that we would, throw that number out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Deborah.
Yeah, thank you. Travis, I take your point about trying to set realistic goals, but I also think that what this snapshot ought to be telling us is how far short of what's needed is actually available. So maybe the solution is not to regard the degree by which we fall short as a failure on DPS's part or on the county's part. We don't have land use regulatory authority. We have limited mechanisms for influencing development. The whole purpose of this is just to keep track of what this community actually needs. So maybe we can somehow or another reframe this so that when we discover that we've fallen short of what we need, it's not the county's failure. It's simply the fact that we still have a housing shortage that is feeding the affordability crisis that we're experiencing.
So I have David and Katie that both went for the mic, so you guys decide who goes first.
Do you want to go first?
I'll just give a quick take on that. Is that I think it's important to tell both stories, and I think what was lacking in the last housing strategy was the nuance of it, and maybe when we give these snapshots, the press release should go out with the nuances and not just all the data, and tell the story, so to speak, of,
right,
of what's going on so that people read beyond the data and the headlines.
Question on the last study, was it funded as well as our hope to be future study?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So it was a different ball game. And we did have some consultant help, but it was a lot of staff time combined with that. consultants' help. And we did have a steering committee with a lot of representation from housing brains and knowledgeable folks around the community.
I say that not to diminish the work that was done, but more to highlight the fact that hopefully with the investment that both we're making and IAED through the IDA, we can really get to some of these, nuanced, split the hair kind of issues where maybe we weren't resourced adequately to be able to bring that story to light previously. David?
Yeah, and I think Travis makes a good point, and Deborah explained it well. Shauna and I aren't out there swinging hammers, and the county doesn't build housing. So when we have these strategies that show how much, it's measuring the market. It's how much the market needs to meet our goals. And our goals are that everyone can afford decent housing in Tompkins County. So when we say how much is needed to achieve that goal, it's something for us to measure not only what we do, but to guide the private market. I think the fact that the student beds came in within 10 of what we said we needed over a 10-year period, people are looking at this, they're planning around it.
And they're building what the money pays for.
It's a useful guide. Most of the housing market is going to be driven by the private for-profit market. There's only so much subsidy to go around. But the purpose of tracking this and showing when we're underneath the goals is for us to remember we are doing a lot. We are not always doing every possible thing that we can. There's an infinite amount of policy adjustments and subsidy sources and things that we can look at. There's a limited amount of resources to pursue that. So we're looking at where the market is working, where the market is falling short, and seeing where we need to do additional work. But I think it is a worthwhile point to say that, the county doesn't build housing. The county didn't not meet its goal in housing that it built because we don't build housing, but we do impact the market in a myriad of ways. And we can see that there is certainly more work to do in the next 10 years.
Well, I think if you look at the ways in which we do impact, right, look at the Community Housing Development Fund and that success story and what we've been, the number of units that's been able to, unfortunately, the sensationalism of how people like to take in data, to catch your headline, then county crushes it with, creative program to offset costs of affordable housing. So I do think that there's nuance and there's a lot of detail that goes into this. So I appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness and the hard work that goes into it. I also want to commend our planning and sustainability department. I don't think we've ever been as well resourced in this topic in the department as we currently are. So to see the the shift in human resource deployment with real experts in this field is to be commended, and that's something that the county has done and made an investment in to make sure that we're getting as much of that nuance, data, information out there to the people that are swinging the hammers and making the investment decisions. And that's the role that we really play. And then also as chief convener with our municipalities to support them in their planning process, which now we have resource to be able to continue to do, but in a way that maybe we hadn't been resourced to do previously. So there's a lot of good in this conversation. So thank you. Shauna, you're next up, I believe, with the Budget Adjustment, Planning and Sustainability Department, Community Housing Development Fund, round 24 and 25 awards. It's stock ID 13794, and I would move if there's a second. Seconded by Travis. Shauna?
Sure. So this is a budget adjustment to bring funding that was authorized by the county legislature for 4 projects in the Community Housing Development Fund. They are just in process of, getting their permits and developing their projects. So you need to bring the money over from the last year's budget to this year's budget, and that's what is described in the resolution. I'm happy to answer any questions about them, though.
This is a very common, for context, a very common practice for us to do with awards and grants that spill from one year to the other, of just sort of sliding the funds forward for bookkeeping and accounting purposes. Mm-hmm. Any questions on this? I will go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. Next up, we have a resolution, budget adjustment, planning and sustainability, community development block grant, CDBG, award for healthy homes, ID 13796. And I would move that, seconded by Legislator Pillar. Shauna?
Sure. So similar to the last resolution, there was funding allocated and awarded to the county to do the Community Development Block Grant Healthy Homes project. We did get a timeline extension for that to November 30th of 2026. So that's great. We get to finish 10 additional projects. And so we had budgeted for 2026, let's see, $293,820. And we just have a budget adjustment. That was an estimate for this year, and there's just a little bit more to come from 2025 to 2026's budget.
Okay. Any questions on this resolution? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Mike? Favor? Sorry. All right. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. And then next we have resolution, budget adjustment, planning and sustainability department, acceptance of New York State Homes and Community Renewal's Office of Community Renewal Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, Housing Strategy ID number 13797. And I would move if I had a seconder, seconded by Legislator Dawson. Shauna or David?
I'll take this one. So this is good news. We won a grant for $50,000 that will fund part of the housing strategy. This resolution both accepts that grant, authorizes the Commissioner of Planning and Sustainability to do the environmental review as the certifying officer, and creates budget lines. This is money that will come in and go out. So it's creating a line for the money coming in from the state and then the money that will go back out. So it's neutral, but we have to create both of those inputs and outputs. Any questions on that?
Can you talk a little bit about the parameters that this funds are for?
Yeah, so this will fund that strategy work, and specifically parts of the strategy that impact below median income households. So that's going to include prepping for future CDBG applications in our various municipalities. As a requirement to be a CDBG recipient, you have to have an up-to-date enumeration of housing quality and housing availability in your municipality. A lot of times individual towns will do this on their own. It's expensive. Most of the cost is kind of in getting started. So our thought was that by wrapping this into the strategy and doing it countywide, we'd be saving our municipalities money, being more efficient, and also making sure that we're including those thoughts in the wider strategy project.
Questions on the acceptance of this grant? Legislator Sigler.
I'm just wondering how the municipalities are brought into the process of it.
So we've been in contact with planning staff at the municipal level. Through this process, the things that CDBG needs is a needs assessment and conditions assessment. The conditions assessment is literally kind of making a sample of homes and going and looking at their condition. That helps guide thinking about, what percentage of homes would qualify for rehab. The program that Shauna just mentioned, moving forward, the homeowner rehab, that requires an assessment of, are there 600 homes in the county that would qualify that? Are there 1,000? It kind of drives the applications. So that part doesn't have a lot of outreach involved. It's more looking. But in terms of the needs assessment, we'll be working with the various municipalities and wrapping them into the strategy. Our goal is the strategy will be very open and involved.
Other questions or additional comments? Just congratulations on application and getting these awards. Anytime we can bring other people's money into the conversation, or money back into Tompkins County through the state, we appreciate that. So thanks for the efforts. And I know these grant applications sometimes are not the most fun thing to do. Not because I've ever done one, but just I've heard people complain about them. So bless those that do it. All those in favor? Great. That passes unanimously.
Can I
Deborah?
ask, is it correct that all 3 of these resolutions are budget neutral insofar as the county's budget is concerned?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be sure.
All right, well, maybe we'll swap out some Department of Planning and Sustainability folks for some others. Nick Hemholt, if you want to make your way to the table, as we're going to talk about the new ithacatrails.org. This is ID 13780. And Nick, I will turn it over to you. And I see Peggy's on the screen. I don't know if there's any part of that with Peggy, or just, hi Peggy, nice to see you. Thanks for joining and playing along at home. But Nick, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Keep it quick because we're getting close to the end of the meeting here. I just thought I'd give a little update to the committee here on a project we've been working on to update the ithacatrails.org website. In your packet, there was a presentation. Gave a little bit of the history of this project, which started as a tourism grant just over 10 years ago, and has had several upgrades and iterations along the way. Some noteworthy ones here are the TCAT to Trails project that Cayuga Trails Club initiated to help get trails connected to the bus routes that are closest to them. Ending dependence on an outside service called Carto, which basically threatened to completely derail the website and cost us several $1,000s to fix, unexpectedly. And then the more intentional effort to rebuild the website initiated in 2023 with a grant to Empire State Development, which was successful, and then matching funds from the hotel room occupancy tax through a strategic tourism initiative grant. Since then, we've been working to identify a consultant and work with the consultant and a steering committee to build a bunch of changes, and just this fall in September relaunched the website. So yeah, a little bit of, why did we do all this? Why is this something that is in our portfolio? Outdoor recreation is a key activity for visitors to Tompkins County. We did a visitor profile study in 2024, and consistently over a third of visitors reported either visiting a state or local park, visiting gorges or waterfalls, or hiking on a trail. In addition, scenic beauty and touring the Finger Lakes are top activities as well. We know it's a core component of our destination promise to people who are considering or visiting our area, so we really want to make sure that we're delivering on that. Yeah, a huge majority of visitors in that study reported that Tompkins County has attractive outdoor recreation options. So this website is intended to help those folks find those outdoor recreation options and find more of them and keep them coming back for more activities. The previous website, which was great, had some substantial drawbacks, and I don't want to bemoan them here, but the biggest ones, I think, were that it was really difficult to maintain accurate and current information. We effectively had to consult a software developer every time a change was needed to the website. It was not functional on a mobile device, a tablet or phone, and it was not compatible with for folks with disabilities in any meaningful way. So yeah, after we got the grant and had we pulled together a steering committee to lead this project. I've got the list of names there. We wanted to make sure we had folks from a variety of sectors represented there. Ray Berger, the town of Dryden, Rick Manning, the former director of the Friends of Stewart Park, which also manages the Cayuga Waterfront Trail. Kim Moore here from Tompkins County ITS. Marcus Reel with State Parks, Aaron Rafalowski with Visit Ithaca, and Laura Winter-Falk, who's the owner of Experience the Finger Lakes, which does tours in the area. They worked really closely with me and our consultants, most notably our partners at Market Space Agency. They did the graphic design and website development, and really the bulk of the work and credit for this project goes to them. We also retained a photographer, Katie Becker Photography out of Cazenovia. She did really, I think, tremendous work getting fresh, updated photography for 75 different trail locations all around the county within the span of about 4 weeks. So, wow. So,
kudos to her.
Yeah, yeah. A big initial step for us was getting updated branding and design choices. The initial website, I don't think was really conceived of as a brand. So this was sort of starting from, what do we want Ithaca Trails to look and feel like, and how do we want that to, the sort of visitor experience to work for people who are on the website. This is what we landed on. There were several other options that the consultants shared with us in terms of the colors and fonts and graphic elements. I'm really satisfied with it. I hope it lasts us a long time and delivers a really great experience going forward. A few of the noteworthy features of the new website, as I mentioned earlier, we are mobile friendly and responsive. So I encourage you to pull it up on your phone, test it out, play with it. I had a really great experience using it on the Black Diamond Trail a few weeks ago, well, months ago at this point. When it was warmer. My son kept asking me how far until the end, and I could pull it up and see the little blue dot of where we were, and that was gold. That worked out really well. The website is built on WordPress, which is a content management system. And actually, earlier in this meeting, somebody found a typo on the website, and I was able to fix it while I was sitting there. We are able to make changes in real time. And in addition to that, not just I am the one able to make changes, our trail stewards around the county are as well. So folks with state parks and Finger Lakes Land Trust and our other partners around the county are able to log into accounts, trail steward accounts, and make changes on their individual pages that are linked with those accounts. We also have features for users, that's you all and everybody watching at home, to report problems you find on a trail. If you see a tree that's down, a washout, something that's an issue, you can report that directly to us, and we'll communicate that with the trail stewards and follow up. Share photos. We've had actually several folks already send us photos unsolicited, all appropriate to this point, and so we're adding those as they come in. And download trail maps in multiple formats. You can get, for most of our trails, a PDF map, and for all of the trails, a GPX file, which you can upload into various smartwatches and other GPS devices. We can group trail activities into experiences. So if you have an interest in, say, bird watching or biking or whatever, you can see those all in one spot. And basically all of the features from the previous website are retained and were crosswalked over to this new website. So I just included a few screenshots here so you can kind of see how the new page looks, and the home page here in both mobile and desktop form. If you were to filter for biking activities, this is basically how it would look on those, and an example trail page. So I encourage you to take a few minutes at your leisure, poke around there. If you see something that needs to be fixed or you have questions about, feel free to reach out to me and I'll look into it. So that's all I had on Ithaca Trails.
Nick, this is great. As somebody surprisingly who's not a huge hiker, I know many of you are probably shocked by me saying that. The thought of how easy this is to navigate, I often feel it's like somebody who's not in this space, that exploring new spaces is very intimidating because you're kind of unsure, or it's an unknown activity. I guess
that's the adventure, Greg.
I know, I'm kind of a control kind of guy. But I think that this is really, this really breaks it down in a way that I'm excited to, personally excited to explore more and see some of these places that are like, oh, that could be kind of easy. Like that could be a neat little primer into like getting out and having a short little hike, or wow, that could be a little bit more of a difficult one. So I think that there's really great value, and hopefully we're pushing this as broadly throughout the community as possible, not only for tourism, but just for quality of life and getting outside and enjoying our natural areas. So thanks for putting this work together. Judith?
I just say, I feel like I've been searching for this website for the last 3 years, and now it's here, so that's fantastic. It's like somebody was doing the work in the back of my brain for me. When I was browsing it, the map was a little laggy, but then it crashed on me, and I don't know if that's my computer, which is new from the county, so it's not my fault, or if it's just like a one-off. Anyway, the map was kind of like taking a while to update, and then it stopped working. Presumably that will go away. The other question I had was, when I click on a trail that I know is closed in the winter, I can see that it says that it's closed in the winter, but I don't see a way to filter those things out when I'm searching right now, and that would be a helpful additional thing for me.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll check in to see if we can add that filter. So.
Other comments? Nick, really appreciate it. Great work. This is very exciting. Maybe we'll take a committee hike or something in 2026 together, a short one, for sure. Next on the, Nick, unless you have anything else to add?
No, not at this time. We'll have a report for Q4 activity next month. So,
Mike Sigler.
I just wanted to point out that there is a water route on the map, Greg. So.
Oh, good.
Oh yeah, that is We did add the Blue Way Trail, which was one of my make sure we get this in here too.
If we only had access to somebody with a boat or something.
Paddlecraft, the Blue Ray Trail is really interesting and something I would encourage everybody to explore offline. Any committee members' reports? I do want to follow up from just real quick from some comments I personally made last night during the conversation around supporting our nurses and their unionization activity. The president and CEO of Cuga Health reached out actually last night personally, and I was able to spend about 90 minutes this morning in a conversation with Rob Lawless to hear a little bit about the work that they're doing and sort of his vision for the hospital. And I thought that was really fruitful and shows that they are, leadership at the hospitals is paying attention and wanting to engage with us at the county level. I shared with our newly elected chair, Shauna Black, that I would help facilitate an introduction so that we can continue to sort of forge and strengthen our relationship with Cuga Med going forward. So I just wanted to mention that as it relates to sort of workforce and those activities. It was a great conversation, and I appreciate them Rob putting himself out there and reaching out. So hopefully that'll bring a lot more fruitful discussion to the legislature in the months to come. If there's no other topics for discussion, we will stand adjourned. It's 4:28. Everybody enjoy the remaining 32 minutes of the meeting on your own time. Have a great day.